All right, so you want the inside scoop on that whole Trump-Zelensky showdown. What really happened and what it means for, well, everything. We've got you covered. We've got news analysis, political commentary, even some direct quotes. And we're looking at it from both sides, not just one.
What's wild is this is so much bigger than just the usual political back and forth. I mean, this could change how the U.S. does foreign policy, like big time. And the whole world's watching. Seriously.
Let's rewind to that Oval Office scene, though. It was like straight out House of Cards, right?
Yeah.
Trump, Vance, Zelensky, all there, cameras on. You could practically feel the tension through the screen.
Yeah, you could cut it with a knife, that's for sure. Trump was laying into Zelensky hard. Ungrateful, disrespectful, even said he was gambling with millions of lives. I mean, that's a public roast, not how you usually talk to your allies.
I can't even imagine being in that room. There's actually a photo of the Ukrainian ambassador, Oksana Markarova. She's got her head in her hands, like, during the meeting.
It kind of shows how Trump sees Ukraine, you know? Like
Yeah.
they're part of some deal, a business thing, not a democracy under attack. He's pushing Kyiv to give stuff up, not Moscow.
So he's saying Ukraine needs to make concessions to get Russia to back off. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a total 180 from how the U.S. has done things for decades. We've always supported democracies, right? How
Yeah.
you get stability, trade, the whole deal. But Trump, he's playing by a different set of rules, it seems.
And the Republican Party's not exactly united on this whole thing either, huh?
Oh, it's split right down the middle. You got guys like Senator Mike Lee, they're loving it. America First, that's their whole thing. Then you've got Senator Jim Banks basically calling Zelensky a whiner.
Whoa, that's quite a difference of opinion. Sounds like the Republicans are, well, not exactly seeing eye to eye.
True, but it's not all black and white either. You do have some, like Rep. Don Bacon, putting the blame on Putin where it belongs. So there's this growing rift in the party over Ukraine, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and on the other side, the Democrats are, well, let's just say they're not holding back.
They're straight up calling it a betrayal of democracy. Senator Jack Reed called it a political ambush that helps Putin, and Bernie Sanders, he was crystal clear. We stand with democracy, not dictators.
And Catherine Clark, she said she never thought an American president would side with Russia over an ally. That's pretty intense.
Shows you how divided things are for sure.
Hmm.
And it's not just the U.S. either. World leaders are watching all this, and they're reacting in their own way. Lots of support for Zelensky and Ukraine, but no one's even mentioning Trump. Like, he's the elephant in the room everyone's politely ignoring.
So they're taking sides without actually, calling anyone out.
Smart move. Like Macron, the French president, he said Russia's the bad guy, plain and simple. And Friedrich Merz, he's likely going to be Germany's next leader. He said, we got to be clear. The aggressor's not the victim. It shows this gap that's growing between the U.S. and its old allies. And that's a pretty big deal on the world stage.
Okay, so we've got the tension, the political divide, everyone tiptoeing around. But what about Zelensky himself? What was he actually trying to say in all this mess?
He came with a clear message. Security guarantees, that's what Ukraine needs in any peace deal. He's basically saying, you can't trust Russia, they'll be back. He even warned if Ukraine falls, Putin might go after NATO next.
Yeah, it makes sense he'd want some backup. He's fighting for his country's survival. He needs to know someone has his back. Did Trump even listen to that, though?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. Trump basically blew off the whole idea of security guarantees. He just wants a deal, any deal, ASAP.
So it's more about looking like he solved things quickly, not so much about actually helping Ukraine in the long run.
You could say that. And when you factor in what Trump has said about Putin before, well, it's the can of worms. He's actually compared himself and Putin as victims of the Russia hoax. Like they're in the same boat.
Now, for anyone who's not totally caught up, what is this Russia hoax exactly?
It's all the stuff about Russia interfering in the 2016 election to help Trump win. Now, investigations found that Russia did meddle, but how much? And if Trump's campaign was involved, that's still up for debate. Trump's always denied it, called it a witch hunt.
So he's basically saying he and Putin are both being unfairly targeted.
That's one way to look at it. And it seems to be coloring how he acts on the world stage. It's not just this one time. He's got a history of downplaying Russia's actions.
And Russia's got to be loving all this. Seeing Zelensky get dissed at the White House, that's got to be fuel for their propaganda machine.
Oh, absolutely. It lets them say, look, the U.S. can't be trusted and try to break up the West's support for Ukraine, put Zelensky in a tough spot. Remember what he said. Ukrainians just want to know America's on their side.
After that Oval Office meeting, I'm not surprised if they're having second thoughts. Seems like the whole thing really shook their faith in the U.S.
No doubt. This whole incident blew open some major cracks in that relationship. What it means for Ukraine, in the long run for the whole region, who knows? But one thing's for sure, this is way bigger than just Ukraine. It's a sign of what's happening all over the world, these big shifts and tensions.
You're right, it's easy to get lost in the day-to-day stuff. But we got to zoom out and see the bigger picture. So what does all this mean for, regular people? Why should we care about this Oval Office drama?
Because it's not just some political game, it's about democracy itself. For decades, the U.S. has been all about promoting democratic values, supporting the good guys, pushing back against the bad guys. But now, it looks like we might be backing away from that.
So we're at this turning point. Like, is the U.S. going to stay the defender of democracy or not?
Exactly. And that sends a message to the whole world. Our allies might start wondering if we'll have their backs, and our rivals like Russia and China, they're going to see it as a green light.
Like we're accidentally giving them the upper hand by being so unpredictable.
That's the worry. And it's not just happening out there, it's here at home too. All the polarization, people losing trust in the system, the rise of populism, it's all part of this bigger trend of questioning democracy itself.
Like a domino effect. Uncertainty abroad, uncertainty at home, everyone starts doubting the system.
Yep, and that's a dangerous path. We got to remember, democracy is fragile. It takes work to keep it going. We can't take it for granted. If we do, we could lose it.
That's a scary thought. So what can we do then? How do we make a difference?
First off, stay informed. Don't just skim the headlines or rely on social media. Dig deeper. Read different sources. Think critically about what you're seeing.
So go beyond the surface. Form your own opinions based on solid info.
Exactly. And once you've got an opinion, don't be afraid to share it. Talk to people. Write to your representatives. Get involved in your community. The more people speak up for democracy, the stronger it'll be.
So use your voice, your vote, your actions. Even small things can make a difference.
You bet. Don't underestimate the power of one person. Change starts from the bottom up. Remember, democracy is not a spectator sport. We all got to play.
That's a good reminder. So back to Trump and Zelensky. What are the key takeaways here? The big picture stuff.
The big picture is we're at a fork in the road. The choices we make now will shape the future of democracy everywhere, not just the U.S. That clash between Trump and Zelensky, it's just one example of what we're up against, but it shows what's on the line.
So it's bigger than just these two guys. It's about the ideas they represent, the decisions our country makes, what kind of world we want.
And that's the choice we got to make, all of us. What kind of world do we want? And then we got to work to make it happen. We can't just sit around and watch. We got to be part of it.
Okay, we've covered a lot. The big picture, the challenges, the call to action. But what about Ukraine? Where do they go from here with all this happening?
They're at a tough spot, caught between the U.S. and Russia. They need help. They need allies. They need to know they're not alone. But if the U.S. is turning away from supporting democracies, who's going to step up?
Good question. Europe's trying, but they've got their own problems. And there's always the risk that someone else, someone with bad intentions, will try to take advantage of all this. It's kind of scary, honestly. Ukraine just stuck in the middle like that.
Yeah, and it gets even trickier when you look at what Trump's said about Putin in the past.
Yeah.
I mean, he's literally said that he and Putin are both victims of this Russia hoax thing, like they're buddies in injustice or something.
Okay, so for people who might have missed that whole saga, remind us, what was the Russia hoax again?
Basically, the idea that Russia messed with the 2016 election to help Trump win. Now, investigations did find that Russia interfered, but to what extent and whether Trump's campaign was actually in on it, that's still hotly debated. Trump's always said it's all a big lie, a political hit shot.
So in his mind, he and Putin are both being ganged up on unfairly.
Pretty much. And that kind of thinking seems to be shaping how he deals with the world. It's not just a one-off thing. He's consistently downplayed anything Russia does.
And Russia's got to be watching all this and thinking Christmas came early. Zelensky getting treated like that at the White House, that's pure gold for their propaganda.
Oh, yeah, they're loving it. It lets them say, see, America's not a reliable friend, and try to weaken the support Ukraine's getting from the West. Really puts Zelensky in a bind. Remember, he said, Ukrainians just want to know America's on their side.
Yeah, after that meeting, who could blame them for having doubts?
Seriously. That whole thing exposed some deep cracks in the relationship, that's for sure. What it means for Ukraine's future, for the whole region, that's the million-dollar question. But here's the thing, this goes way beyond Ukraine. It's a symptom of these huge shifts and power struggles happening all over the globe.
Right, we got to step back from the headlines and see the forest for the trees. But how does this affect, everyday people? Why should we even care about this drama between Trump and Zelensky?
Because this isn't just about politics. It's about the fate of democracy itself. For decades, America's been the champion of democracy, right? Standing up for the good guys, pushing back against the bad guys. But now, it seems like we might be stepping back from that role.
So it's like, are we still the good guys, or are we changing the game?
That's the scary part.
Yeah.
And that sends a message to everyone, our allies and our enemies. Our allies might start thinking, can we count on America anymore? And our rivals, like Russia and China, they see it as weakness, a chance to grab more power.
Like we're accidentally giving them an advantage by being so wishy-washy.
Exactly. And it's not just on the world stage, it's happening here at home, too. All this division, people losing trust in the system, the rise of populism, it's all connected to this bigger trend of questioning democracy itself.
It's like uncertainty overseas leads to uncertainty here, and then everyone starts doubting everything.
That's the slippery slope. Democracy is fragile. It needs constant attention. We can't just assume it'll always be there. If we get complacent, we could lose it.
That's a pretty bleak thought. So what can we do? How can we fight back against that?
Well, first of all, stay informed. Don't just skim headlines or rely on social media for your news. Dig deeper, read from a variety of sources, and don't be afraid to question what you're reading.
So basically, become a critical thinker. Form your own opinions based on facts, not just hype.
Exactly. And once you've formed an opinion, don't keep it to yourself. Talk to people, write to your elected officials, get involved in your community. The more people speak up for democracy, the stronger it gets.
So it's about using our voices, our votes, our actions. Even small things can make a difference.
Absolutely. Don't underestimate the power of one person. Remember, change starts with individuals. And democracy, it's not a spectator sport. We all got to participate.
That's a good way to put it. So bringing it back to Trump and Zelensky, what are the big takeaways, the stuff we should all be thinking about?
The big takeaway is, we're at a crossroads. The choices we make today will shape the future of democracy everywhere, not just here in America. That clash between Trump and Zelensky is just one example of the challenges we're facing. But it highlights what's at stake.
So it's more than just about these two guys, right? It's about the ideas they represent, the direction our country takes, the kind of world we want to live in.
Yeah, and that's the big question. What kind of world do we want? And once we decide that, we got to roll up our sleeves and make it happen. We can't just sit on the sidelines. We got to be active participants.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture, the challenges, the call to action. But what about Ukraine itself? What does the future hold for them with all this going on?
They're in a tough spot, caught between two superpowers. They need support, they need allies, they need reassurance. But if America's turning away from its traditional role as the defender of democracy, who's going to fill that void?
That's a great question. Europe's trying to step up, but they've got their own internal issues and economic woes. And you always got to worry that someone else, someone with less than noble intentions, will try to exploit the situation. Yeah, it's a real nail-biter for Ukraine, stuck in the middle of this power struggle. But stepping back even further, what does this whole shift in U.S. foreign policy mean? I mean, turning away from democracies, what does that mean for the average Joe listening to us right now?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yep.
If we connect this Ukraine situation to the bigger picture, it's like a canary in the coal mine. Authoritarianism's gaining ground everywhere, and America seems kind of hesitant to push back.
Almost like we're at this crossroads. The world order we've known, it's being challenged, maybe even rewritten.
Exactly. And that throws up a ton of questions. What happens to all those global alliances we've built up? Will democracy keep losing ground? And the big one, what role does America even want to play in all this?
It's a lot to unpack, for sure. So out of everything we've discussed today, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
This isn't just some political drama happening far away. That's what I want people to get. This shift in U.S. foreign policy, this turning away from democracies, it has real consequences for everyone. Global trade, international security, even the values our own society is built on, they're all affected.
So it's not just about Ukraine's future, it's about ours, too.
Absolutely. It's about the kind of world we want to live in, the world we want to leave for our kids. And we got to be the ones to shape it. We can't just sit back and watch it happen.
I think you've given our listeners a lot to chew on today. A real deep dive into what's going on and why it matters.
I hope so. But the conversation doesn't end here.
True. That's what makes these deep dives so interesting. They spark your curiosity, get you thinking critically, and hopefully inspire you to keep learning and forming your own opinions.
That's the goal. Knowledge is power, but only if you use it.
So to everyone listening, we'll leave you with this. With U.S. foreign policy seemingly changing course, where do you think we're headed? What could happen, both in the short term and down the road? Keep digging, keep asking questions, and keep talking about it. The future of democracy might just depend on it.